Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
This is Adam.
This is Steve.
And today we're going to give our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Mosaic, A Story of Civilization. But before we do, I have some poll results for you. Every week on social media, I ask a poll question and we talk about it on the show. And this week I asked the question, do you think board game awards like the Spiel des Jahres or the Golden Geek Awards influence your interest in board games?
Why would you be asking this question right now, Tim? It's crazy.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
The options I gave, yes, puts them on my radar at 62.8%. Yes, I need them now is 1.3%. If already interested was at 13%, and nah was 22.9%. How do you guys answer this question? Do award shows influence how you think about games?
They do. It's hard to deny it. I put yes, that puts them on my radar. So usually they have a slew of games that I'm already interested in and kind of looking out for. But if there's something that's winning all these awards, then I'll be like, oh, what's going on with that? And I'll take a look at it and see what I think about it. It's at least fun to be aware of it and participate in the hype that it's getting. And, oh, this game shouldn't have gotten that award, or this game is fantastic. It's totally worthy of this award. So I like being part of that and hearing the discussion on it and knowing at least a little bit about the game so I can understand the discussion surrounding it a little better.
Yeah, I also chose it puts it on my radar for two reasons, right? If some game is getting a lot of hype from awards, definitely worth checking out at least. But also if I'm just at the game store looking at random games and I'm looking at 3 different games and one of them's gotten one or multiple of those awards, it's definitely going to give me an indication that might be a better game.
Cool. I would have said if already interested. I was just thinking back to like any time in the past when a award show kind of made me want to buy a game. And mostly what it does is like, if it's a game I've never heard of, I pretty much ignore it. Last year, the Spiel des Jahres had a nominee for Living Forest, was one of their connoisseur awards. And I had not really heard of it. And I looked at it and I still don't care about it. It's not something that has just been on my radar before that. But some of the games that show up there, like when Scout got nominated, I was like, okay, I'd heard decent things about that, but wow, this little card game got this huge award. Now I'm going to pay a little bit closer attention to it. And so I think, sometimes if I'm already interested in a game, it's going to make me a little bit more interested. I want to check it out. I want to see what everyone thinks about it. I think the most interesting answer here was the one that most people answered, and that's yes, puts them on my radar at 62.8%. That's true of games, and you know what? It's probably also true of podcasts. And as it turns out, right now, the Golden Geek Awards are running.
What?
There is a category for Best Board Game Podcast.
Tim, how do I vote on that? Or do you have to vote? How does it even work?
Yeah, so if you want to put basically what they're doing right now is they're looking for nominees. So they're asking for the public to go out and vote on their favorite board games, their favorite board game podcasts, their favorite board game apps. And so if you log in at boardgamegeek.com, and if you don't have an account, you can set one up really quickly. It's free, doesn't cost you anything to do. And they have a banner right on the homepage going to the Golden Geek Awards and selecting nominations. Now, this interface is kind of clunky. I'll warn you about that right now. And the other thing is it will only allow you to vote if you pay 20 Geek Gold. If you don't use Board Game Geek a lot right now, you're not going to have Geek Gold. But just hit me up on social media. Email me at tim@boardgamehottakes.com with your Board Game Geek username, and I will send you 20 Geek Gold, and then you can go out and vote. So as I mentioned on the poll, what we want to do is get on people's radars. This is one great opportunity to do that. If we were to get a nomination, there's going to be 10 podcasts that get nominated for this. Only 3 are going to make it to a finalist award, but just getting the nomination would be amazing for us. It would get us on a lot of people's radars. It would be great to have more people join our community and listen in the show every week. Hey, Steve, did you go out and vote for this yet?
I certainly did. And seeing as how I only listened to one board game podcast, I had to nominate Board Game Hot Takes.
Right on. All right, cool. Well, anyway, we would appreciate your vote. Hit us up if you have any challenges voting. I'll be happy to help you out with it. Let's jump into a description of Mosaic, A Story of Civilization.
In Mosaic, A Story of Civilization, players will guide an ancient civilization from its infancy through maturation. Embarrassingly, the Mediterranean has returned as the centerpiece for this highly economically focused, area influence infused, tile placing, chit exploding riot of a board game. After a heavy-sided setup, players draft the leaders of their society and 5 technologies that their society have already perfected or on the verge of developing. After this draft, players take one of 8 actions. All of these actions involve either producing a resource for your civilization or spending these resources in favor of points or greater resource production in the future. For example, I can take an action to build a city. I'll spend 4 stone and 2 population. The city gives my civilization an extra stone production in the future because of my leader, who is an engineer, and the city will also provide points due to area control scoring, achievement scoring, and potential wonder scoring. Although my stone production has gone up, the total yield has gone down since 2 of my population moved to the city and are unavailable for a future work for stone production action. Actions flow around and around the table, and many are accompanied or mandated by the purchase of a card on offering. Cards offer production bonuses, pillars of society markers, wonders, in-game bonuses, and instant resources at the expense of player money or resources from their own reserves. Empire scoring cards are seated in these offering decks near or chronologically later than the halfway point. Once the 3rd Empire scoring card is revealed, players check for area influence one final time, and in-game points are tallied to determine the victor. Mosaic was designed by Glenn Drover in 2022.
Welcome back. All right, we're going to jump in and talk about the gameplay and mechanisms to start here. This was all 3 of us played for the first time tonight. We played a 3-player game. We unfortunately had to play on Tabletop Simulator, which is not fun and clunky, but that doesn't say anything about the game itself. So let's jump into the mechanisms here. What did you guys think?
I'm going to start off with the way this game begins, and that's with the setup here. It's kind of a mechanism, and it's kind of a plus and a minus for me. The seeding of the board, I think, is a mechanism of this game. The way that you got all these different cards, the way the scoring cards are going to come out, and the way these tokens are placed all over the board. And then we put out your starting city, and you have this technology draft. So the way that whole initial setup, it's really a part of the game. You can start planning out your strategy as these different tokens are going out there. These different regions are developing. You're starting to plan already where you want to start positioning yourself to move through the rest of this game. So I think that initial part of the game, I don't know what to call it, the setup or the draft, you're making your initial plans. I think that's a big part of this game, and there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on the setup a little bit, even though the basic actions have the same costs and benefits for all the players, the benefits that your leader and that your starting text give you is going to make a big influence immediately on where you start focusing your energy and time.
Well, let's jump into what the core of this game is, and it is kind of a drafting game. I mean, you do start with some normal kind of pick and pass drafts at the start of the game, but then there's all these different displays of cards out there, right? There's a technology display, which has like 5 cards. There's the build display, which has like 5 cities or like towns you can build, which is the population cards. There's the tariff cards. So there's all these sets of cards that are on the board that you just get to pick from. And most of this game is just picking cards and you know, getting the benefit from them. There are obviously some other things that you have to that come into play, like what you have to pay for them. But basically, it's a big old draft. It's like looking around the board and saying what card works the best for my plans right now and picking it up. And I thought that was pretty interesting. It took a traditional drafting kind of game and gave a whole bunch of different options and different ways to pay for them and different benefits from them.
Well, this draft, it's more than just a draft to me, Tim. I think that's a good way to describe it initially, but it's also ties into the economy of this game so well. If you want to build, you have to have enough to pay for a city, or if you want one of these wonders, you have to have enough to pay for these wonders. To pay for a city, it's going to take population, but to pay for population, it takes food, but you're not going to be able to produce as much food if your population is less. So you have all of these brutal decisions going into this economy that's absolutely amazing, the way it's tied in to the actions of this game.
Not to jump ahead too much, but there are several different types of cards that you can choose from in the different
the offerings.
That's it. You've got your population offering, you've got your building offering, you've got your tariff and tax offering, you've got your government offering. It's always tricky because almost all the cards have some value. But every time you take a card, there's 2 possible negative and or positive scenarios, right? Every time you take a card, a new card's going to come up. Maybe the card you got was okay or even great, But if it turns over a card that is even better for your opponent, that's risky. The even riskier part is that shuffled into each of these offering decks is a scoring card. And you need to be positioned accurately and correctly for those scoring cards when they trigger. If you don't have control of those regions, and if you don't have your government in place, and you don't have the correct achievements for when those scoring rounds trigger, it can be bad or it can be very good. So it's risky.
You can't live life like that. You just got to take what you need and don't worry about what your neighbor gets after you. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, good facts there. What was kind of fun about a lot of these cards, a lot of the things you're doing is that they had prerequisites, right? There's a cost. Like the technology is a great example. You have to pay 5 knowledge, I think it was, this resource you can collect. And when you pay that resource, you can buy cards from this offering. And you can buy them anytime. You can just add them to your hand. But the only way to actually play them, which you can do as a free action, is have matching tags. Think like Terraforming Mars, where you can kind of build up some tags that are kind of the prerequisites for the cards. But most of these cards had prerequisites. Most of the technology cards did. And it was kind of a fun puzzle to put together. But the tags also gave you some other benefits. There were other cards you could unlock. There were endgame scoring conditions you could unlock with these tags. So you're just kind of like always watching what all these tags are doing and trying to track them. There was 9 different ones. I think they called them the pillars of civilization. So each of these,
Yep.
9 little tags or icons is supposed to be one of the pillars of civilization. Think of things like government and religion and knowledge or whatever, military. And so it was a fun puzzle to just watch those. So you're not only looking for the benefits you get from the cards, but also what tags is it going to give me so that maybe I can build the next card after that. And that was a fun part of the puzzle for me, not only with that opening draft, and then looking at that technology row and saying, okay, now I want to take that card because it'll set me up to take that other card next if nobody else beats me to it. Lots of fun positioning here and getting the right things lined up.
Yeah, a couple of comparisons you're drawing, which I think are pretty accurate. Terraforming Mars, one for all the tags and everything that's happening here. I got a little bit of the Expanse. I've been talking about the Expanse a lot lately, but this gives me that feel of, there's the area control feel too that we haven't touched on too much yet, where you're kind of placing influence. And instead of cubes, like in the Expanse or a lot of other games, you're putting blocks, these big old blocks that feel like chunky cities or these wonders. They give you the sense of an actual development rather than just tiny little cubes you're sliding out there. So I liked the area control, the area influence aspect of the game here too. It felt like it was super advantageous for you guys to get a stranglehold on some of those territories. I was lagging behind in that, but there was plenty of ways to score points in this game.
Yeah.
And you see, I'm just kind of rambling from thing to thing now, but I'll pause right there on the area influence portion of this game, because that was fantastic too, I thought.
I agree. And I think the military had an interesting spin in this game. It directly tied into the regional influence, which is how you do a lot of your round scoring. It wasn't super confrontational for the most part, at least with the technologies that we uncovered. The only direct confrontation was military to military. So you could build up military in a region to increase your influence, but if there was no other military there, you had no risk of direct confrontation. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it was. It was like a little bit of something you had to watch for what people were doing with military. But just on top of that, we're talking about a lot of mechanisms, and there's like 5 others I want to talk about. The economy is really neat here. The way that you build up production and then have to create those resources by doing workers, adding to your population. The way you find these trade goods on the board based on where you place cities, how your wonders interact with your cities. Like there's all these things going on, and yet the game is pretty streamlined somehow. And I think it's kind of a genius act that you've got this big game with lots of fun stuff to do. And I think you could teach this game pretty quickly. And I think you can get in and start playing it. And I think I could go back to this game in 2 months and I wouldn't have to recheck the rule book. I think I'd be able to just except for the setup maybe.
Yeah.
But I think I could just get right back into it. And I think it's pretty cool that it did that so well.
I think a lot of that has to do with the turn structure here, Tim, is what you're hinting at. Once this game starts, it just go round and round and round and round and round. There's no production phase. There's no, it's just, and now it's your turn, and now it's your turn, now it's your turn. And if you don't have the resources, you can take an action to get yourself more resources, and that's your turn. And then it just goes on to the next person. So it's quick and it just moves, and you can kind of start planning 2, 3, 4 moves ahead of, that scoring card just came out. Am I in the right position to get any points? So that's kind of this rapid pace feel you get from this game. I say rapid, but we did have some moments of thinky indecision. At least I did, for sure.
Yeah, to touch on both of those points, some of that was the TTS interface, right? That it's a big board. There's a lot of cards to look at. You're scrolling all over the place. You're zooming in. You're mousing over stuff. So I think that was partially the problem, but there are a lot of things to consider. So it definitely can lead to some moments of indecision for sure. But one of the many fun things that I enjoyed about this game was the production. I know that's a weird thing to say, but any game where I can upgrade something, I'm pretty happy. And you get to upgrade your production all the time, and it has a direct impact on how effective you are going to be at acquiring additional cards throughout the game. So I had a great time with it.
Yeah, I thought the production and resource management was cool here, but it was also really interesting because early in the game, the first couple turns, I was like, yeah, I'm going to play this technology and this technology to get my production up. And then I never wanted to spend time and resources doing that again because like I could be doing other stuff. You kind of benefited from it. But one of the cool things though was that oftentimes you'd get production for things accidentally. There'd be a card I'd buy and it would be like, it'd give me some tags I wanted, but it also increases production. Or I'll buy this farming town just because I want to take a area, like I want to add some area control element to the board and grab a trade good. And then, I get some farming production with it as well. So those productions were kind of bumping up even if you didn't really try to, but they were important. And I realized let's face it, I won the game.
Here we go.
I realized about, 2/3 of the way through, I was like, I could be in trouble if I can't keep up. These guys are producing huge resources. They're able to keep building cities or build whatever. And my production's pretty slow at this point. So it got kind of painful at the end when I really needed more resources. But I did feel like it was like, oh, I don't want to take a turn just to increase production so that in 3 turns I can do a work action and hopefully get the benefit from it or something like that.
Yeah, we're having those turns at the end of the game, Tim. We were both just producing a bunch of stone. I was like, I gotta just sit here and make a bunch of stone. And you're like, reluctantly, I gotta do the same thing because we were both going for like the big point scoring wonders. Exactly. So the stone to do that. A couple more comparisons. I wanted to go back to the market a little bit at PAX Premier 2nd Edition. Now, one thing PAX Premier 2nd Edition does, and through the ages, is a new story of Civilization that has this river coming down where the newest cards that come out are more expensive than the ones that have been out a while. And something like that, and this is also something that the Expanse does too, where the newest cards, they're not just free and awesome right away. There's going to be a premium you have to pay if that card comes out and it's like perfect for Steve's situation or perfect for Tim, somebody else's situation. So I do like that little extra, hey, you got to pay a little bit more for this newer, shinier card. And it doesn't have that kind of luck of the draw. It mitigates that luck of the draw thing a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. It did not exist here. I mean, the cards maybe were reasonably balanced. You're always paying 5 knowledge, like for a technology card. But I did find some that would pop up there that I was like, oh my God, I hope it comes back around to me. Mm-hmm. But I think you were often balanced. Like if it had a big benefit, it had a lot of like tag conditions. There was one that I ended up building that just gave me 9 points because it was like 1 for every technology. And that's pretty huge to pay 5 knowledge for 9 points. So that didn't really seem fair. But on the other hand, there's going to be a lot of times in the game where it wouldn't have actually been that valuable for anybody. I noticed the designer on here. I saw his name is Glenn Drover, and I was like, I feel like I've heard this guy's name before. And so I looked him up, and he was actually the publisher who founded Eagle Games, which is now Eagle Gryphon Games. This was not published through Eagle Gryphon, so I don't know if he's not related to, or did they just decide it wasn't a good fit for them? But I thought that was interesting. I don't know what the history is there, but he's designed a whole bunch of games, and it looks like most of them are Civilization at least themed, or like he's got some Civilization, some Railroad themes, but kind of stuck in that Civilization building world. I'm impressed. I want to check out some of his other designs.
What do you guys think about the scoring, the Empire scoring, how that was seeded, and there was kind of this search, or the tempo was involved. Tempo was a factor here. You could kind of push the flow of the game, or you could kind of try to pump the brakes a little bit and slow it down. I liked how the governments gave you a chance to wipe those cards out and get, up to 5 new cards and try to rush to get to that Empire scoring if you're in a position to get it. That again is another comparison to something like The Expanse or PAX Premier Second Edition. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I thought it was both interesting and kept me on the edge of my seat. You always have to worry and or try to push that line, right? Am I in the right position for the Empire scoring to happen? Well, if so, then I want to get as many cards out as possible. Little bit of a preview. The mechanism that triggers the bag draw for Clank in Space is similar. If you want the bag draw to happen, you're buying extra cards so that you hope that an enemy comes up. If you don't want the bag draw to happen, you're not buying cards, even if you might want one of those cards, because you don't want that bag draw to happen. And the same mechanism is in play here.
Counterpoint, I hate user-controlled scoring in endgame. There's the potential for it to really slow the game down and people to just to stall things out. And I also hate that it's like you're just kind of surprised by it. And yeah, you can control it a little bit. You can decide whether you're pulling from the row, but it's kind of random. I mean, in this game, I had pretty good area control. Then Steve took one action, put a bunch of military out and took that. And I had to do a production on my turn. And then somebody triggered the end game, the final Empire scoring after that, and just wiped out probably 15 to 20 points from me because I happened to not, be in the right turn order there. So I don't like it. The game was still fun, and I liked what the scoring was. I liked the area control scoring and how it worked. I liked the government scoring that Adam mentioned and how you can kind of get some bonus points for doing that. And I liked how it kind of escalated over the course of the game, that you built up those in-game points, but also had a lot of end game scoring to add up as well. But I don't like it when games just kind of randomly throw it in at different times. You don't know when it's going to happen. And one last thing about this is that this game could set you up to trigger 2 Empire scorings within a turn of each other. It didn't happen to us tonight, but that could be really frustrating if you're not in a good position and then you get 2 in a row right after you. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I just got totally killed without even having a chance to react to it.
That's another tiny difference in execution with huge implications. In PAX Premier and The Expanse, those scoring cards will come out, but somebody has to buy them. So it doesn't just flip up and activate right away. And that makes such a big difference. If that card pops up here, you just score no matter what. If it's PAX Premier or The Expanse, it's in the scoring row. Somebody could buy it, but they might want to stall and get themselves some more influence before everything is scored in The Expanse. So I think that's interesting. I think it is not as enjoyable this way, Tim, or you. I mean, it's just a slightly less awareness, right? It's coming in the bottom half of that deck, but it's so different when you can't actually see it out there and have a little bit of time to prepare.
I'm going to disagree. When there's a card out there that can trigger the scoring, but you have to buy it, that puts somebody in this distinct advantage to trigger that scoring, right? Like, I can get X number more points before I trigger the scoring. In this situation, you have to be prepared at all times for that scoring to trigger. You have some lead up. It's going to be in the second half or the bottom half of the deck, second, third, or bottom half of the deck. But you don't know exactly when. And so you have to be prepared at all times. You can't wait in 3 turns, I know I'm going to be able to trigger the scoring condition. So I'll wait until I have an advantage and then trigger it. So I actually think it's better.
Well, I don't like the random pacing of scoring in either case, whether you have a few turns of visibility or not. Personally, it can set you up for bad pacing in a game or good pacing. It could just be a little random. But I will say that the game overall was fun enough and light enough. And I know that's, again, with how much we've talked about it, it's strange to say it was light enough, but it felt like a light, fun, mid-weight strategy game where a little bit of randomness and a little bit of excitement popping in there is totally okay with me. It wasn't like a 3-hour brain burn where then all of a sudden you were surprised that something happened. This is a game that I think once you know it and it's set up on the table already, it's going to play pretty quickly, and it feels light, like it doesn't feel like you're making big, heavy decisions. At least it didn't to me.
Breezy, it moves right along. I think the choices can still be pretty heavy and spicy at some points, but it does have that kind of breezy, brisk, flowy feel going for it for me, which it's been a while since we've had one of these, so it was nice.
All right, well, let's talk about the production of Mosaic. Now, I do know that there was a Kickstarter version of this that had some big premium components to it, and then there's a retail version that is a little bit, cardboard shit heavier. So I think the experience we had is going to be more related to what would be the retail version of it. I'll just start by saying it's a lot of chits and it's a lot of cards. And the cards felt like pretty standard Civilization era artwork. It wasn't cartoonish. It was kind of like almost realistic, slightly kind of painted illustrations, and it was all fine. The board was pretty in the way it was laid out and kind of the colors and the grid that it formed. It almost looked like a kind of a stained glass type of mosaic. But so it was kind of a cool production on the table. But other than that, from a component perspective, nothing really stood out to me here.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Tim. There's cards and a board, but I think the map is a cool aspect of this Civ game. I like the map seems important to me here. In Tapestry, it has its importance too, the way you're placing the tiles and trying to get some bonuses for this and that. But this one, it felt more puzzly to me, especially with that area control, area influence aspect of it. The art, I love it. It is this mosaic style, little pieces of tile all wedged in here in the different colors. Pretty basic, but very functional. But yeah, it's nothing too crazy. It's just a sharp, on point, shitty production.
One of the other aspects about the map, the main board area that I enjoyed was the asymmetry of it. Right, different than Tapestry is that it's not, a hexagon, right? Each region is shaped differently, and that ties into both the military movement, which we didn't experience a lot of in this game, but also the town placement, because you can only place towns adjacent to a city. And so I think that there's a lot to play with there in terms of exploring the shapes of each region, and each region being unique. So I thought that was interesting. The cards were one of the big failures for me in this game in terms of production. There is important text on the cards. The art, I didn't really feel contributed to the experience. And so personally, as with any card-based game, I would prefer that the text be larger if the art isn't contributing something important. And I didn't really feel like the art contributed anything important to the experience here.
Well, I didn't think the art was amazing or anything, but I definitely wouldn't give up more artwork for more text on these cards. I think that they're readable enough. I thought the iconography was all good enough personally. So I disagree on that. Like, I don't want to end up with a Beyond the Sun where you got a bunch of tech cards that are just white space and text on them. Like, there's, give it some flavor. And it may not be exciting flavor, but give it some flavor. I wanted to circle back really quick on the asymmetry on the maps. One of the other things I noticed, like some of the continents had, or countries had, regions, I guess, had more port cities in them. And also the layout of the tiles that were seated at the beginning made some interesting decisions about where you were going to go. So just adding on to that, that's a mechanism thing. But that's all I have to say about art and production. Theme, right? This is the Civilization game, and it's a pretty traditional, starting with civilizations from back in 600 BC or whatever. Because it didn't stretch across a large swath of history, the technology tiles, they didn't really have to like put it into eras. Everything would kind of fit within, I don't know, a several hundred year or maybe 1,000-year time period that's all way before we're familiar with, and technology was moving so slow that any of it probably could have been developed at the same time. So it didn't feel like Tapestry's kind of weird how you can go to space and then discover paper. There was really nothing like this that felt that anachronistic. And so, I thought it was just a pretty generic Civilization theme.
One thing I do want to say about the cards here is that they're super functional again, right? The presentation of information is absolutely fantastic. The artwork's not going to blow you away or anything. It's kind of this Renaissance-y, blandish, but not horrible art. It's, it's not going to blow you away, but it's not horrible either. I enjoy looking at the stuff. And then, you have the tags, the requisites, the prerequisites over there on the right side of the card, and then the tags that they give you all on the bottom. So super easy to parse the information off these cards, very functional. And I don't know, I thought they were pleasant to look at. They're just a clean design here, nothing that's going to be distracting. So I did enjoy the way the cards were put together, even though they don't blow me away.
Yeah, I guess I do have to call out that the Kickstarter production of this looks ridiculously cool with like 3D printed buildings and dual layer player boards, and it's pretty incredible. This is always frustrating to me when you've got a game that you like and then it turns out there's a really great production of it, but it's going to be expensive and hard to get. But I'm also looking at pictures of the box. The box on the Kickstarter one is quite a bit larger than the retail one, which makes sense. All right, cool. Well, let's jump into our final question, and that is, would you request to play Mosaic, A Story of Civilization, again?
I would request to play this one again. I think there is going to be a decent amount of patterns that'll develop through the game, things you can recognize and things you can kind of, I know this combos with this, and this. But there's also going to be that sense of changing things up with the way these decks are kind of pre-constructed throughout the game. And the different leaders and the text that you draft are going to point you in a different direction to get you going. So I love this game. There's all kinds of directions you can go. It has that feel of terraforming Mars to me, but it's just snappy and around and round and round it goes. I thought the flow was a little smoother. I had a great time playing this game. And yes, I would absolutely request to play it. I've been thinking about it. 30 minutes in, I was just like, oh my gosh, this game has so much to offer. The way this economy ties in, there's some crazy situations that twisted my brain right off the bat, but I could start to comprehend as we got into it too. So I like that feeling. I'd love to play this one again.
Yeah, it's a definite yes for me. I think this game has a ton of replay value. I hope we get it on the table sometime.
Hey, me too. I really like this game a lot, and I was just saying that I was a little disappointed. I was at a local sellers market, which I talk about frequently, where people sell their used games, and somebody had the Kickstarter version of this, and it was pretty high price, so I wasn't going to go in on it, just blindly and spend $200. But I think I'd spend $200 for the Kickstarter version of this game. But I think I'll probably be happy to pick up the retail version of this if I see it around at a decent price. This was a really fun game. I think this is a game I'd like to go back to many times, and I think it's going to be fun to explore. I think it'd be easy to teach people, and it plays 1 to 6 players. Like, there's not too many decent weight games that are not going to, get way too long at 6 players. And I think this could actually, it's going to take a few hours with 6 players, but I think it could actually be fun and interesting, and lots of area control going on. More likely better at like 4 or 5. 3 was great. It was fun playing it at 3. But yeah, really fun game here. Fun decisions, lots of fun variety that came up. That technology deck was like 90 cards or something like that. So we didn't even see half the technology deck. So lots of stuff to explore here. I liked it a lot. I would like to play it more.
We did mention setup a little bit here and there. I think the heft of the pregame setup is outweighed by the smoothness of the rest of the game. You do a lot of the work up front to enjoy the breeziness for the rest of the game. I think it's totally worth it to get that setup done for the payoff.
Yeah, I'm glad you called that out, Adam, because that is something that we often harp on a little bit in games. And this is going to be a bit, you got to sort up all these card decks and put all these tokens out on the table. Definitely not something you want to be doing when everybody shows up for game night. Have this set up in advance because it's going to take 20 minutes to get set up, but it was worth it. That'll wrap up our conversation on Mosaic, A Story of Civilization. Let's jump into some games that have been on our table and some future takes right after this. All right, welcome back. What's been on your table this week?
Okay, I have a future take this week. Galactic Renaissance. This is by Christian Martinez and Matago Games. So Christian Martinez, if that name sounds familiar, he did Inish, and that's one of my favorite games with beautiful artwork. This game has its roots in Innis, allegedly. Different game, but some of the same patterns might emerge, or some of the same feelings you might get from Innis are allegedly involved in this game. So I knew about it. I wasn't too keen on backing it because I'd seen the art from afar. Looking at the front of the box, it looks like this goofy kind of, what's the game? Gaia Project kind of art. And I was like, oh, not another weird alien, not quite right alien artwork. So yeah, did I buy this game strictly based on the art? That's kind of what put me over the hump, because I came back and looked at the Kickstarter page, and man, this art is beautiful. I don't know what style it is, but it doesn't look like any other board game style I've seen. It's almost comic bookish. I don't know if you guys are looking at it right now, but it's this beautiful sci-fi artwork, amazing color palette. There's Nebula's giant weird looking spaceships, almost like the Jodorowsky's Dune, if you've seen that documentary. Some pretty far out stylish looking aliens in this game. So once I gave it a closer look, and with all the roots and the origins and Christian Martinez, the designer here from Matago Games, a company that I trust, I decided that I couldn't resist. It was too beautiful. The components here, there are a lot of like ellipsoid and oval, just funky shapes that you don't see a lot in board games. So on reputation and aesthetic, I backed Galactic Renaissance, and now I'm going to hype it up and hopefully not be disappointed when it gets here in 4 to 5 years.
Well, first, shut your mouth about Gaia Project artwork because it's great. I want you guys to stop making fun of it. But Gaia Project artwork does not compare to this. This is really, really incredible sci-fi artwork. Really great color schemes in here, interesting characters, and really great illustration style. So I totally get that. I cannot wait to play this game when you get this. Do you think it's like a card drafting game? Have you looked into the gameplay at all? Is it kind of similar to Inish in that perspective?
You know, let me see if I can figure it out in a couple seconds. It says on the Kickstarter page here, you're going to recruit unique specialists, each with their own abilities. So that sounds like some sort of drafting or engine building.
Who knows? Hey, did you happen to see that Inish just hit the top 100 on BGG this week for the first time?
There's a couple of breakthroughs. Inish in the top 100 and Dune Imperium broke to the top 10. Yeah.
Big week for some fun games. Well, this game looks really great. You know, Inish is a really interesting design. So I will be very excited to play this when you get it in, Adam, in, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, whenever it gets delivered.
Yeah. What about you, Steve? What have you been up to?
This is an older game, 2017. But I got to have a in-person play of Clank in Space. We played with 4 players this week and had a great time. Everyone really enjoyed it. 2 of the 4 players were somewhat familiar with it, and 2 of the 4 players had played it once or maybe twice and didn't really remember it that well. Everyone had a great time. There's so much theme. Drafting mechanics are pretty straightforward. You got to race through the ship, counter some enemies along the way, hack some data ports, buy some port keys, and teleport, or you can take the
Hyperloop
drive or whatever it's called, and you get to the control room and you got to steal an artifact, and then you're racing back to the escape pods. Just a lot of energy and fun. So we had a great time with it.
I love Clank in Space, but I got some exciting news for you. Number one is that we'll be playing Clank Catacombs together in 2 weeks when we're in Sedona together. And Clank Catacombs is, in my opinion, a straight improvement on Clank in Space. Gives you the variability that Clank in Space does with a little less overhead in the actions you're doing. Super fun part of it. But this also leads into my future take for today. Clank Legacy 2. Folks, there is going to be a Clank Legacy 2. Clank Legacy, one of the best board game experience of all time that I've ever had. And Clank Legacy 2 is the second version of that. So it's got to be good. They said something about it being a very they called Clank Legacy kind of a cooperative experience. And from a story perspective, it was, but it was typical Clank where you're still trying to win, get the most points or whatever. But then they're saying about Clank Legacy 2 that it's got a little bit more direct conflict, a little bit more direct interaction. I don't know if that's just in the story or if it changes the base Clank mechanisms, but I'm so excited for it. I think it's coming up on Kickstarter in a month or 2, and I don't know if I'm going to back it or just wait for retail, but most likely I'll back it because it's just too good of a game for me to potentially miss sometime down the road, and who knows what kind of add-ins or whatever they'll have in it. So anyway, Clank World, yay, super fun. Glad you got some Clank in Space in, Steve. The game I've had on my table this week a lot is Legacy of You. This is a new design by Shem Phillips and Garfield Games, and this was just delivered to Kickstarter backers within the last couple of weeks in the United States. May still be being delivered around the world. Legacy of You is a solo-only game, and it's in their kind of historical series of games that include Hadrian's Wall, which was a very heavy roll and write set, during the Roman Empire. And this has got a different background, but basically this is a historical game set during the reign of Emperor Yao in China. You're the son of an advisor of the king who is trying to stop flooding coming through the lands and also stave off barbarians. So there's a historical backing to it. It's a solo only game, and it's a very Euro-y Euro game as well. And there are not too many of those solo only games that are also Euros. But the way this game works is that the board is laid out in front of you. There is a kind of a river running down the middle of it, and you set up on the river these upside down cards that represent the where you're trying to basically create canals. And so when you're able to create a canal, you remove one of those cards, and it opens up some new spaces and shows that there's a river being rerouted there. Beyond that, there's some buildings out on this board here. And then above the top of the board, you're going to lay out a bunch of these townsfolk cards, which are beneficial cards. And all the way on the right end, you're going to lay out one barbarian card when you start the game. What's going to happen over the course of the game? It's very much a resource conversion game, but you're going to start with four townsfolk cards in your hand, just a deck of 10 randomly drawn, but you're going to start with 4 in your hand. And the card is going to have a couple effects on it. You can either discard it for an effect, you can scrap it completely for an extra effect, or you can kind of tuck it under your board in a space for future income. So some interesting decisions there, but you're essentially trading that in for resources, which are going to be shells or provisions or different colored meeples. And then the meeples you're going to use for a couple different ways as well. But one of them is that you can turn these meeples and provisions into conquer the barbarian that's coming in here. Okay, none of that sounds super exciting, right? It's you're turning in resources for other resources, converting things, whatever. But what this does in a resource conversion game is puts a high level of tension, because what you're trying to do is essentially continue to build these canals. But as you build canals, it's going to reveal more barbarian symbols. And at the end of each round, when you have to pass, when you've done taking all your actions, you're going to have to flip over more barbarians for the number of symbols that are out there. And if you're not conquering the barbarians from the previous round, you're going to start to have these barbarians building up. So you're trying to spend these limited resources you've got to both build the canals as well as stop barbarians from coming in. These townsfolk cards that are at the top, you can either spend provisions to recruit them into your deck, or you can just use them for one-time abilities. You're kind of like paying them to just get one benefit from them. So that's another resource you got to play with, and it's all variable. And this is one of the things that Garfield Games always does really well for me, is that a lot of the stuff in the game is card driven. And so you got this big pile of cards. Every time you start the game, your starting deck's going to be different. Every time you play out the barbarians, it's going to be different barbarians that come up. And this game just works so well as a solo game. Some of these games, when you're doing resource conversion, you might want to sit there and think for a long time, like, okay, what's the best action I can do? You know what? Nobody's going to be waiting for you to take your turn. You can sit there and spend 5 minutes on your turn, take as much time as you want to. Nobody's waiting for you. And then you can make the best choice possible. Beyond that, okay, so this is a resource conversion Euro game. Adam's rolling his eyes over here at me. He's fallen asleep, I think. But there really is a cool tension here. The game is very challenging. Basically, what's going to happen, you'll lose the game if the water is going to move over every time you have to reshuffle your deck. So that's one of the reasons you're risking losing cards from your deck, and there's several ways that can happen. But the water will move over. If the water ever moves to a place where you haven't built a canal yet, you lose the game. If the barbarians ever cover the entire top of the game and you can't refill it, you lose the game. Or if you ever run out of cards in your deck, and when you have to scrap a card, or it's called taking damage, then you lose the game. So there's all these effects you're fighting against, and what you have to do is basically stave off the barbarians and move all these river cards and get the water revealed. So it's tense. It's kind of like think of something like Pandemic, where things are just kind of escalating on you, and they're growing, and it's getting harder and harder. But it's also got some engine building in it. You're taking buildings off some areas, and you're able to put them on other areas and get benefits and get some improved benefits and worker placement spaces. It's hard to explain how fun it is. It's just a resource management game. It's also a legacy game. Well, it's a campaign game. It's got this cool mechanism where there's all these story elements that are going to pop up during the game. Some of the cards, as you reveal them or as you defeat a barbarian, are going to have a little story number. And so you look in the storybook, and it gives you a little bit of a paragraph to read about what's happening, who you're encountering, what you're dealing with. And many times what will happen is it will say, okay, take that card and put it in the history. And you just take that card and you put it in a slot in the box, and you're never going to touch it again for the rest of the campaign. But then go through this story deck, this deck of 100 cards, and you're going to pull out a couple of cards, and they're going to be added in. Maybe they get shuffled into the barbarian row, they get shuffled into the townsfolk, or they're going to replace one of the canal cards that you're going to play with the next time you play it. So the board state, the starting state of the board the possible things you're going to run into are going to change. I'm not going to spoil too much with this because there are surprises that come up in this game, but there are going to be new challenges that you encounter and mechanisms that show up in the middle of this campaign that are going to change things. The way you win this campaign is you have to win the game 7 times. Not in a row, but 7 times total. The way you lose the campaign is you've lost the game 7 times. And the way you keep track of this is that there's a little stack of 7 win cards and 7 loss cards. Every time you lose a campaign, you flip over the top card of this randomly shuffled deck, you read a story point about it, and then you change the future game state. So if you've lost, you're going to add something that's going to make the game a little bit easier in the future. If you've won, you're going to add something that's going to make the game a little bit more challenging in the future. So there's this constant tension. Even if you feel like you got the game figured out, the next time it might be a little bit tougher. Even if you feel like you can never win it, you've lost 3 times in a row, there are things that are going to start to make it a little bit easier for you. So it feels, for me so far, I'm 5 games into my campaign, it feels like it's a tension that's shifting. Right when I think I've got it figured out, the next time somehow I just get destroyed by it. So really interesting mechanisms there. And this is a resettable campaign. Basically, it's set up so that when you're done with the campaign, you just put all those story cards back in order in the main deck, and you'll only have encountered about half of them in the course of this campaign. So you're going to see completely new elements, some completely new surprises on the next campaign. Here's why I like this a lot. A couple things. Okay, first of all, yeah, I just said it. I love this game. It is really fun. I played it 5 times in a row and I keep wanting to go back to it. I just, every time I'm away from it, I'm like, I want to pull this game out and play it again. 1, sets up in 30 seconds. I've got a great insert in this box. You lay at the board, put up a couple of cards out on the board, and the resources you don't even have to pull out of the box. It's got a perfect little insert. You can leave it set to the side. Literally 30 seconds, I have this game on my table. That's how I want to play a solo game. I don't want a half-hour setup to play a solo game. The game is challenging. It's a very, I would say, mid to heavyweight resource management game that gives very tough choices, but you can still play it in about an hour. So even with a little bit of AP, even sit there and thinking through your turns, you're going to get done in about an hour for a game. And there's the fun of the legacy, but the legacy adds some tension. The campaign adds some tension. If I'm playing a solo game against just points or against an autumn or whatever, I generally get halfway through and I'm like, why am I even doing this? What am I going to get out of it? Well, this one's exciting. It's like, if I beat this one, then I'm that much closer to winning the campaign. There's there's meaning to every single game of it, every session that I have of it. So all of these things combined it's just made it into a great experience. Aside from just being a fun, mechanism wise game to play, beautiful production. It's got Sam Phillips artwork on it. You'll know him from some of the other Garfield games. I'm really loving this game. I think if you're a solo player and you like Euro style games, you should buy this game. If you're a Euro player and you haven't gotten into Solo World, but you're thinking about trying one, this is the best possible solo experience you'll have. So I love it. This has risen to the top of my top solo games of all time. And I can't wait to keep going back to it. I can't wait to finish this campaign, reset it back up, and see how I do going into the next campaign. And if I've gotten better at it, what's going to change in this story. This game is great.
Tim, this game looks pretty fantastic. I got 2 questions for you. First one, and I think I know what you're going to say. Spirit Island is a highly touted solo game.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear a little bit just comparing the two as far as setting them up and getting them played and how you kind of go through the game. And it sounded like the invaders or this whole like attacking whatever it was kind of has this maybe a similar effect. So if you could expound on that a little bit. And second question, is the art on these cards, are they all different?
Yeah, I think they're all different, but it's all Sam Phillips artwork style, which is, again, it's very recognizable if you've seen it. And I'm not sure if I went through the entire deck, I wouldn't see some duplicated artwork, but I think they were. And there was definitely a lot of unique characters, a lot of unique faces in there. Each of the townsfolk are kind of showing their profession. So someone's carrying a basket of fish and someone's got a stick over their shoulder and another, so I think they're all unique, but I'm not 100% on that.
I guess the question was, I was trying to lead towards there's a few of them here on Board Game Geek and they look amazing. They all have a different feel to them, a different look on their face. They're all slightly nuanced, and I think that's fantastic. For all the ones I'm looking at here, I have no idea if the actual game has any duplicates or not.
Yeah, I think they are all unique. I can tell you, I think every card in the deck is unique, even if the artwork isn't. But I'm pretty sure the artwork is as well. But the cards themselves each have different effects or costs or benefits or whatever on them. So it feels like every time you're playing, you're getting a different experience. You've got a different hand of cards that you're starting with.
How does this compare with, setup wise and gameplay wise to something like Spirit Island?
Well, for me, I found it just better across the board than for Spirit Island. The setup's a little bit easier, quicker. Part of it is that with Spirit Island, it felt a little heavy to me. I think maybe it's because I always try to play two-handed on that, and managing two hands of cards anytime I'm playing, it's kind of like that's just a lot to think about and have to, change direction between, oh, I'm playing this character now versus I'm playing this character now.
Yeah.
Some people have said playing Spirit Island like with a single character is perfectly fine. And I never tried that. Maybe I should have done that, but this doesn't feel like that at all. This feels like you're playing a Euro game. There's an impact on your decisions for this game, but also for the whole campaign. So everything that you're doing, it matters. Like there's a lot of Euro games where I'll be playing solo, and again, I'm like halfway through it, and I was like, why do I even care what happens here? Like it's just I just kind of give up, and it doesn't feel that way here. There's stakes. There's stakes on what's going to happen here, but. And Spirit Island probably feels that way to a lot of people. I think it's really, it's the weight. It's also the style of game. This is definitely not Spirit Island as far as the kind of area control and just card play of this is a resource conversion and resource management game. It's a little bit of a deck builder. It's a little bit of worker placement. It kind of takes a few standard Euro elements you've seen. The closest I could think of that you would know would be like Lost Ruins of Arnak. It feels very Lost Ruins of Arnak like to me, not necessarily the specific mechanisms, but just the, hey, if I put this guy here, then I get this resource, and then I can trade this resource for that. I can now play this card, and then with this card I can go pick up this other thing, and that's going to let me get these things. Now I can defeat that barbarian. And so it's this like little like, hey, you start with 4 cards and a few resources, but somehow you manage to get 10 actions out of that round, and you're set up to even get more actions in the next round. So it's just this great escalating engine builder resource management thing. So it doesn't feel like Spirit Island, and as a solo experience it was a lot more fun and better experience for me personally.
Okay.
So I just want to say, like, I've never played a solo game, but you're so excited about this game, I would actually try this game as a solo board game. So many things about it sound interesting. The campaign style, like what you're talking about in terms of the storyline changing, it reminds me a lot of like Near and Far, which is super fun, that aspect of it. But also the combination of the Euro-y play with the sort of legacy style mechanisms. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I think Near and Far is actually a great example that I hadn't thought about as a good comparison. There's not too many designers that are able to kind of fit storyline into Euro gameplay successfully. And Ryan Lockett, with Near and Far and a lot of his games, he tends to be one of the better people to do that. And yeah, I think Sean Phillips pulled this off really well. It tells a really interesting story. You kind of get into the characters. A lot of the story beats, that the things you're reading out of the storybook are kind of written as like letters back home to his wife, fiance, or lover, or whatever. So you're hearing him tell his story through these story points. Like at the end of the day, yeah, we got crushed by barbarians, but I feel like we at least, rescued this young boy, and it was worth it. So you're getting these little story points, and you're kind of feeling the emotion that's in there. It's written really well and just told really well. This just finished being delivered on Kickstarter. I think he just posted yesterday that you can now pre-order this from the Garfield Game website. So I don't know if it's going to be in retail beyond that, or if he's only going to sell it directly on his web store. But I do know, I think you can go out and order it, and it's not going to be too expensive, if I remember from what I paid for it in the Kickstarter and what his games usually go for. I'm guessing this is like a $40 to $50 retail game would be my guess. So if you're interested, yeah, I'd recommend it. Also, you got to check out the insert on this. If you guys didn't see a picture of the insert on Board Game Geek, I think it's image 16 of 24. I'm looking at it right now.
I saw that thing. It looks slick, man. It has all the labels underneath.
Yeah, it's really cool. What they did is they took a, kind of a traditional plastic molded insert, but it's clear, it's transparent. And then underneath it is on the bottom of the box is printed what goes in each of the little component trays. And this is really useful in setup for this, because there's like a story deck, right, that you're going to just use during the campaign, and then you reset it at the end. But you want to make sure that that all stays in order in one place. So there's a card slot for it, and there's card slots for each of the different card types you're going to pull out here. So it's very well organized, very easy to put away. And again, like I said, all the other components, you just leave them in the box. They're nice little trays in there. So I just put it next to the game board, and when I need a shell, I just pull it out of the shell spot. If I need a brick, I pull it out of the brick spot. And, I never have to put anything out on the board. The setup is so quick, and this insert is part of it. But I think for any type of game that has a decent usable insert, like this was a really cool way to go. Instead of just having a colored insert, it tells me exactly where everything goes. It's so easy to put away and so easy to, to get set up, to get out of the box, get set up, but also to put away after every session. Very cool game. That will wrap up this week's episode of Board Game Hot Takes. Again, please go out on Board Game Geek and nominate us for Best Podcast. It would be thrilling and would also help a lot of people find us. And we'd really appreciate it. So until next week, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.